In the year 2784, humanity had long outgrown its humble beginnings on Earth. Now a dominant force in the galaxy, humanity's reach spanned hundreds of systems, from thriving metropolises on terraformed planets to vast space stations orbiting dying stars. They had forged alliances with countless species, built powerful fleets, and expanded their knowledge beyond anything their ancestors could have dreamed. Yet, in all their triumphs, one piece of their history had been buried under layers of time. An ancient promise made to the Varth, an enigmatic alien race that had once helped humanity survive a galactic crisis. A promise so old, its very mention was forgotten in the whispers of history. Captain Elara Durant stood at the helm of the Reclamation, a ship built to explore the unknown. The mission was simple: investigate an unusual signal emanating from the far reaches of the galaxy. Its source, a remote, seemingly lifeless star system, had been lost to time, forgotten in the wake of humanity's rapid rise. The signal itself was peculiar. No other ships had ever detected it, not even the most advanced sensors of the Galactic Council. It had taken months of careful triangulation, but they had finally pinpointed the coordinates. "Prepare for entry into the system," Elara ordered, her voice steady, but beneath the calm surface, something gnawed at her. She had lived for exploration, for the thrill of the unknown, but this mission felt different. It wasn't just another anomaly in the vastness of space. This signal held a weight, an undeniable pull. There was something important about it, something that made her gut tighten as they drew closer. "Captain, the source is coming from the third planet in the system," her chief science officer, Dr. Jelen Cora, reported from the console. It's emitting a Varth encryption signature." The name hit Elara like a thunderclap. The Varth were a mystery, an ancient species whose technology had helped humanity rise from the ashes of the First Galactic War. They had disappeared centuries ago, leaving behind only their relics, cryptic messages, and, according to some, unfulfilled promises. Elara turned to Dr. Cora, her face serious. "Varth encryption? You're sure?" He nodded gravely. "Positive. The encryption is decades, maybe even centuries old, but it's unmistakable." A shiver ran down her spine. Humanity had made a promise to the Varth long ago, an oath that had been passed down in secretive whispers among the highest leaders of the time. The promise was simple: return what was given, protect what was entrusted. What it meant, exactly, no one knew. No records existed that could shed light on its significance. Over time, it faded into myth, a legend left to be forgotten. But the Varth had always been a people of immense power and even greater secrets. What had humanity left behind? What had they promised? "Are we sure this signal is related to that promise?" Elara asked, her voice faltering for just a second. She didn't like the unknown, not when it carried such weight. "We don't know yet, Captain," Dr. Cora replied, his voice equally cautious. "But the signature matches several fragments of Varth texts we've analyzed over the years. We may be closer to uncovering what the promise actually meant." Elara nodded, her thoughts racing. What if the past was coming back to haunt them? What if humanity had failed in keeping their word, and now the consequences were catching up? "Set course for the third planet. Full speed," she commanded. As the Reclamation surged forward, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary mission. Whatever awaited them on that distant planet would change everything. The galaxy had forgotten the promise, but the past was never truly gone. And now, humanity would have to face the consequences of its forgotten oath. The Reclamation descended into the quiet atmosphere of the third planet, its sensors blinking in anticipation. The world below was barren, its surface scorched and cracked, giving no indication of the ancient civilization that had once called it home. Yet the signal, still pulsing at regular intervals, beckoned them onward. Elara stood on the bridge, staring at the vast, lifeless landscape on the view screen. The planet had been mapped before, but no one had dared venture close. There was nothing here, or so it was believed, just another dead world in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. But now, the planet held something vital. She could feel it in the air, a weight she couldn't explain, a lingering sense of something unfinished. "Captain, we've located the source of the signal." Dr. Cora's voice broke the tension. "It's underground, deep in the planet's crust. There's an old facility, not listed on any of our charts. It matches no known structures from any recognized species." "Underground?" Ilara repeated, frowning. "Let's make sure it's safe for landing. I don't want to walk into a trap." "A wise precaution," Dr. Cora acknowledged, though his tone held an edge of curiosity. He had always been fascinated by the unknown, sometimes to a fault. There are signs of subterranean tunnels and large-scale excavation. It's almost as though someone was trying to hide something. The ship slowly lowered toward a rocky plain, settling near an entrance hidden behind jagged rocks. The facility was buried deep, almost as if the creators had wanted to keep it concealed, even from the stars. Ilara's crew, in full protective gear, prepared for what lay ahead, but the questions weighed heavily on her. What kind of message had the Varth left for them, and why had they been forced to hide it? A small team of explorers, led by Ilara herself, emerged from the reclamation and descended into the darkness below. The tunnels were vast and winding, their walls covered in strange, glowing symbols. Some of them were familiar, like the ones in Varth texts they'd unearthed from ancient ruins. But others were entirely new, arcane, and unintelligible, even to the most advanced translators humanity had. "These symbols, they're not just language," muttered Dr. Cora, running his hand over one of the walls. "This is some sort of encryption, a key to something else." "Keep your focus," Ilara said, her voice calm but firm. "We need answers, not riddles." They moved deeper into the facility, the air growing colder and the silence pressing in around them. It was impossible not to feel that something monumental had been concealed here, something more than a mere artifact. The tunnels eventually opened into a vast chamber, its center dominated by a massive stone structure. The surface shimmered with energy, giving off an ethereal glow, and the air around it hummed with power. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as she approached. "What is this?" one of the crew members asked in awe. This is what they hid," Ilara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is what we promised." The stone structure was not just an artifact. It was alive, its surface constantly shifting, as if it were breathing, responding to their presence. They'd come for the Varth relic, but this was something more. This was a nexus, a focal point for something vast and unimaginable. The promise humanity had made to the Varth was not just an oath, it was a contract tied to this living entity. Dr. Cora stepped closer, his hands shaking with a mixture of awe and fear. This is a machine of unimaginable power, Captain. It's more than technology, it's a sentient being, a gift or a curse." Ilara's mind raced. The Varth had never intended humanity to simply inherit a tool. They had been entrusted with something far more profound, a power that could reshape the galaxy for good or ill. A soft voice echoed from the stone structure, reverberating through the chamber. "You have returned," it said, its tone ancient, full of weight and warning. "The promise must be kept, or all will be lost." Ilara froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The voice was not mechanical, it was alive. The Varth had left them this sentient relic, and now it was speaking directly to them. But the true weight of the message hit her immediately. The promise wasn't simply a relic to return. It was a pact that, if broken, would bring the full wrath of an ancient power down upon humanity. "The promise must be kept," Ilara whispered to herself, the gravity of the situation beginning to sink in. Whatever they were about to unleash, it would change everything. And the first step in breaking, or fulfilling, that promise was just beginning. The voice that emanated from the stone structure continued to reverberate in the chamber, its words swirling in Alara's mind like a growing storm. The promise must be kept. The voice seemed to know the very core of her being, its tone laden with the weight of ancient knowledge. It was not just a warning, it was a call to action, an obligation buried deep in humanity's past. Alara took a step back, her crew anxiously watching her. "What do you think it means?" Dr. Cora asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. He was normally the first to explore new knowledge with excitement, but there was fear in his eyes now, and Alara understood why. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her gaze fixed on the structure. "But I don't think this is just about the artifact. This is about something bigger, something we don't fully understand yet." The voice continued, as if waiting for a response. "The time of reckoning is upon you. The oath has been forgotten, and so has the cost of breaking it." Alara's hand went instinctively to the comm device on her wrist, ready to call for backup, but something held her back. She needed answers, and they wouldn't come from running. She signaled for her crew to remain silent, her attention fully on the artifact. For a long moment, the only sound in the chamber was the hum of the energy surrounding the structure. Then, another voice, this one softer but unmistakably human, spoke over the comms, crackling through the silence like thunder. "Captain Durant, this is Lieutenant Hayes. We've got a problem." Alara tensed. Hayes was her second in command, and she trusted him implicitly. But his voice now carried an edge of something she couldn't quite place. "What's going on, Lieutenant?" "We've had a security breach. I don't know how, but we've got unauthorized personnel on board. They're not from our fleet, Captain. This isn't just a simple saboteur. They're after the artifact." Alara's heart skipped a beat. Hayes was calm, but the way he spoke made her feel the gravity of the situation. Whoever was after the artifact, they were well prepared, and they knew exactly what they were after. "I'll be back to the ship as soon as we can secure this area," Alara replied, but as she turned to signal the crew to prepare for departure, the voice from the stone structure spoke again, its tone now urgent and commanding. "They are already among you." The words hit her like a physical blow, and her thoughts raced. How could it know? They had only just arrived, and she was certain no one from outside the ship had made it down to the planet's surface. Unless someone on the crew was already working with them. Alara's stomach twisted. Her mind went immediately to Lieutenant Hayes. He had always been a strong ally, but could he have been compromised? Could the betrayal have already begun? She turned to Dr. Cora, her eyes narrowing. "I need you to stay with the artifact. Keep it secure. If this is a trap, I need to make sure it's not taken." Dr. Cora hesitated but nodded, his face pale as he stepped forward to study the structure. "What about the crew?" "I'll handle it. You stay here," Alara said sharply. There was no time to waste. If Hayes was part of this plot, then her team was in danger. But if it wasn't him, then the truth was far more unsettling. Someone on the Reclamation was already working against them. Alara's mind raced as she sprinted back through the tunnels to the landing bay. The words of the structure echoed in her mind, but she had no choice but to push them aside. The betrayal had begun, and now Alara had to face it head-on. When she reached the ship, her worst fears were confirmed. Hayes stood at the entrance to the Reclamation, flanked by a few familiar faces, crew members she had known and trusted for years. But now they held blasters in their hands, and their eyes were cold, calculating. "Captain," Hayes said, his voice eerily calm, "I'm afraid we can't let you leave with that artifact. It belongs to someone else now." Alara's blood ran cold. The traitors had already made their move, and her crew was divided. The weight of the promise, of the responsibility that had been forgotten, now loomed over her like a storm. As she stared down Hayes, the question hung in the air. Was this betrayal the first step in breaking the oath, or was it part of a much larger plan to fulfill it at any cost? Either way, the fight for the artifact had just begun, and it was clear that no one could be trusted anymore. Alara's breath caught in her throat as she stood facing Lieutenant Hayes and the row crew members. The sight of them, weapons drawn and eyes cold with resolve, made her pulse quicken. Hayes had always been one of the most loyal officers on the Reclamation, a man of integrity until now. Now, he stood at the precipice of a dangerous choice, one that would plunge them all into conflict. "Hayes, what's going on?" Alara's voice was tight with disbelief. "You're working with them, aren't you?" He didn't flinch, but his expression darkened. "You don't understand, Captain. The artifact isn't just an object. It's the key to a power far beyond anything humanity is prepared to handle. There are others, larger forces, that want to control it. I've made a deal with them. This is bigger than just us." Alara's mind spun, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of what Hayes had just revealed. Who else? Who's pulling the strings? Hayes didn't answer immediately, his gaze flickering toward the doorway behind him, where a group of soldiers from the Kolkari, alien mercenaries, deadly and relentless, stood, their weapons gleaming. The Kolkari had been rumored to have their eyes on the artifact for years, but Alara hadn't expected them to be involved this early. "You're working with the Kolkari?" Alara asked, voice low with fury. "They've made it clear that whoever controls the artifact will control the galaxy," Hayes said, his voice taut with urgency. "You don't get it, Captain. This isn't just about protecting humanity. This is about survival. We've been weak for too long. The Kolkari offered power, resources, everything we need to take the galaxy back, to ensure humanity doesn't get crushed underfoot." Alara took a step back, her mind racing. The betrayal stung deeply. Hayes, someone she had trusted implicitly, had sold them all out to an enemy that would only use humanity for their own gain. And now, with the Kolkari involved, there was no turning back. The war had started, and the first battle would be fought on their very own ship. "You've made a terrible mistake, Hayes," Alara said, her voice steady with anger. "This is not what the Varth intended. This artifact is not a weapon. It's a promise, a bond. You're not just breaking an oath. You're condemning humanity to a future of war and destruction." Hayes' eyes hardened, his resolve unshaken. "The promise is dead, Captain. No one remembers it. No one cares. The only thing that matters now is who holds the power." Before Alara could respond, a sharp crack of energy echoed through the hangar, followed by the sound of blaster fire. The Kolkari soldiers, tall and menacing with their armor gleaming darkly, began to advance, weapons raised. The crew members who had sided with Hayes moved to flank them, a deadly formation that encircled the area. Ilara's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm, but she knew this wasn't going to be a simple confrontation. The Kolkari weren't interested in negotiation. They were here for one thing, the artifact. "We need to act fast," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. She quickly assessed the situation, realizing that they were outnumbered and outgunned. But the Reclamation wasn't just a ship, it was their home, and it held secrets, corridors, and hidden compartments that even the Kolkari wouldn't expect. She had to think fast. "Dr. Cora," Alara shouted, hoping the scientist was still within the artifact chamber. "Get the artifact out of there. We need to get it to the shuttle bay, now." A crackling voice came through the comms. "Captain, it's not responding. The artifact, it's reacting. It's—" Before Dr. Cora could finish his sentence, the line cut off abruptly, followed by a surge of static. Alara's stomach tightened. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The artifact was not simply a passive object. It was responding to the threat, as if it knew something was at stake. The tension in the air thickened, and she could feel it pressing down on her, suffocating her with the weight of the promise, the responsibility, and the betrayal. "We don't have time," Alara said, her voice hardening with determination. "Hayes, I'm giving you one last chance. Stand down. Get your people off this ship, or I'll make sure you regret it." Hayes didn't even flinch. "Then you'll have to make your move, Captain, because we won't stop, not until the artifact is ours." With a single silent command, the Kolkari soldiers moved in, and a firefight erupted across the hangar. Blaster fire lit up the space, ricocheting off the walls, as Alara ducked behind cover, her heart pounding. She knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about the artifact anymore. It was about protecting humanity's future, no matter the cost. And if Hayes and his new allies wanted war, they would get it. The fight for the artifact had escalated into a war, and Alara would stop at nothing to ensure humanity didn't lose it all. The hangar erupted into chaos. Blaster fire streaked through the air, sparking off the walls and control panels. Alara crouched behind a stack of crates, her pulse pounding in her ears. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but she could still hear the cold, calculating voice of Lieutenant Hayes ringing in her mind. He had made his choice, and now the consequences would play out. "Captain, we need to move," Lieutenant Kara, one of her most trusted officers, shouted as she crouched beside Alara. Her face was grim, but determination burned in her eyes. "We're not winning this fight if we stay here." Alara nodded. They were outgunned, and the Kolkari mercenaries were expertly maneuvering around the hangar, using their advanced armor and tactics to cut off escape routes. The traitorous crew members under Hayes' command weren't much better. Alara could see them in the distance, firing at her own crew with ruthless precision. "We need to hold them off long enough for Dr. Cora to secure the artifact," Alara said, her mind racing. "If we lose that relic, we lose everything." Era's eyes flickered to the main entrance of the hangar, where a dozen Kolkari soldiers were advancing. "You know we can't do that alone. We'll need reinforcements. We should fall back to the command center." "No time," Alara replied, her voice sharp. "We fight here. We can't let them get any closer." A sudden explosion rocked the hangar, sending debris flying through the air. Alara's ears rang, and she instinctively shielded her face. When the dust settled, the Kolkari soldiers had gained ground, closing in on their position. Their advanced combat gear, designed for brutal efficiency, gave them the edge. "Move out," Alara barked, her mind working quickly to plan their next steps. She wasn't about to let this fight be over before it had begun. She and Kara broke cover, rushing to the far side of the hangar, using the wreckage of the ship as cover. Blaster fire streaked past them, narrowly missing. Alara's thoughts were split between the immediate danger and the ever-present weight of the artifact. She couldn't afford to fail. Humanity's future was at stake. Kara fired back, covering their retreat, but it was clear that they were being pushed back. "They're coming from all sides, Captain. We need to cut off their reinforcements. Can you get to the control panel?" Alara's eyes scanned the hangar, settling on a large console at the far end of the room. It controlled the hangar doors, the automated defense systems, and the ship's main security protocols. If she could reach it, she could lock down the hangar and prevent any more Kolkari from coming in. But it was risky. The console was behind enemy lines, and the Kolkari soldiers were already closing in on her position. "I'll go," Alara said, her voice steely. "Cover me." Kara hesitated but nodded, her expression fierce. "You got it, Captain." Alara sprinted across the open space, the sound of blaster fire echoing in her ears as she ran toward the console. The Kolkari soldiers turned to face her, their weapons trained. She fired back, her shots hitting their armor, but doing little to slow them down. A sharp blast clipped her shoulder, and she staggered but didn't stop. She reached the console, her hands moving quickly to bypass the security locks. Sweat trickled down her forehead as she worked, her heart racing. She could feel the Kolkari soldiers closing in, but there was no turning back now. She had to finish this. "Come on," she muttered to herself, fingers flying over the control pad. "Just a little more." Suddenly, the doors to the hangar slammed shut with a deafening noise, and a loud alarm blared across the ship. The Kolkari soldiers froze, momentarily stunned by the sudden lockdown. Ilara's hand hovered over the final button to seal the doors completely. "Got it," she shouted, a sense of relief washing over her. But as the security doors slid shut, Ilara's relief was short-lived. The Kolkari had already breached the internal corridors. She'd bought them some time, but it wouldn't be enough. She had no illusions. This was only the beginning of a much larger battle. "We've bought some time," Ilara said, her voice steady as she turned to Kara, who was now at her side. "But the Kolkari will find another way in. We need to finish this quickly. Dr. Cora, what's the status of the artifact?" The comms crackled to life, and Dr. Cora's voice came through, strained and filled with static. "Captain, it's not what we thought. The artifact is." Suddenly, the line cut off, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Ilara's heart clenched. Whatever had happened, it wasn't good. "We need to move now," Kara said, her voice urgent. Ilara didn't need any more prompting. She nodded and signaled to the crew. The real battle was about to begin, and this time, it wouldn't just be for the artifact. It was for humanity's survival, and the Kolkari wouldn't stop until they had it. Ilara turned back to face the locked-down hangar doors, preparing for the next wave of the coming storm. This was no longer just a fight for control. It was a fight to prevent the galaxy from falling into chaos. The hangar doors groaned under the pressure of the Kolkari mercenaries' relentless assault. Their strength and tactics were unmatched, and the longer Ilara fought, the more she realized just how close they were to breaching the ship's core defenses. The Reclamation, their home, their vessel, was at risk. The artifact, which had once been a mysterious relic from an ancient civilization, now represented the future of humanity itself, and she would protect it with her life. "We can't keep them out forever," Kara said, her voice grim as she fired at a group of Kolkari advancing along the walls. "They're cutting through our defenses too quickly." Ilara glanced at the monitors on the console, seeing the Kolkari forces systematically dismantling the ship's internal security systems. They weren't just here for the artifact. They wanted control of the Reclamation. If they succeeded, it would mean humanity's subjugation under the Kolkari's brutal empire. "We need to get to the control room," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Dr. Cora still has the artifact. We need to ensure it stays secure, no matter what." Kara nodded, motioning for the crew to fall back. They made their way through the dimly lit corridors, carefully avoiding areas where the Kolkari had breached their defenses. Each step was calculated, but the clock was ticking, and the situation was growing more dire by the second. As they approached the central command hub, Ilara's thoughts turned to the voice she had heard earlier, the ancient presence that had warned them. The promise, the oath humanity had once sworn, was now a fragile thread holding the galaxy's future together. But if the Kolkari succeeded in seizing the artifact, that thread would snap and chaos would reign. "Captain," Kara said quietly as they reached the control room door, "do you think Hayes truly believed this was the right choice? Was he just following orders, or did he betray us out of fear?" Ilara hesitated for a moment, then spoke with a quiet conviction. Hayes made a choice, and it wasn't about survival, it was about power. He believed the Kolkari could give him control, but he didn't understand the cost. I don't think he truly grasped the consequences of breaking the oath. Kara looked at her, her brow furrowed. "You think the artifact holds something more than just a weapon, don't you?" "I do," Ilara replied, her voice low but firm. "The artifact isn't just a tool, it's a key. A key to understanding the true nature of the promise humanity made long ago. And if we don't keep it safe, we risk losing everything we fought for." They reached the control room, where Dr. Cora was waiting. His eyes were wide with panic, and he barely acknowledged their arrival. Instead, he looked directly at Ilara. "Captain," he said urgently, "there's something you need to see. The artifact, it's reacting in ways I can't explain. It's sending out pulses of energy. I think it's trying to communicate, maybe with something or someone. Ilara's heart sank. She had feared this moment. The artifact was never meant to be simply studied. It was always far more than that. And now it seemed to be calling out, as if the galaxy itself was responding to its awakening. Can we stop it? Ilara asked, her voice tight. I don't know, Dr. Cora admitted. I've tried isolating the energy field, but it's growing stronger. If we don't stabilize it, the pulses could attract even more Kolkari ships. We'll be sitting ducks. Ilara took a deep breath. The situation had escalated beyond a simple security breach. It was now a race against time. The Kolkari were only one part of the threat, but if the artifact's power became fully unleashed, it could change the balance of power across the entire galaxy. Is there any way to shut it down? Ilara asked, glancing at the artifact on the table. It was a strange, otherworldly object, smooth, metallic, with a faint, pulsating glow emanating from within. I'm not sure, Dr. Cora said, his voice filled with frustration. But we need to figure it out fast. Ilara thought for a moment, then looked at her crew. We don't have the luxury of time. If the Kolkari gain control of this ship, it's over. We need to make sure the artifact stays secure, no matter what. The hum of the artifact grew louder, filling the room with a low, vibrating pulse. Ilara's instincts told her they were on the verge of something monumental. The artifact wasn't just an object of power, it was something sentient. It had to be, and the Kolkari weren't the only ones aware of its power. What if the artifact has been waiting for this moment? Kara asked quietly, her voice full of realization. What if it's waiting for humanity to make its choice? Ilara's heart skipped a beat. You're saying it's testing us. Kara nodded. The artifact might be responding to something inside us. It's not just about controlling it, it's about whether we're ready for it. Before Ilara could respond, the ship's alarms blared, signaling another breach. The Kolkari were inside the command hub. It was only a matter of minutes before they overwhelmed them. The choice was clear. Ilara had to make it now. Would they be able to unlock the artifact's true potential? Or would humanity's legacy be wiped out by those who saw it only as a tool to control? The air in the command hub crackled with tension. Ilara's mind raced as the steady pulse of the artifact reverberated through the room. It was no longer just an object of power. It was a sentient force, alive in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. The Kolkari were advancing, relentless, their presence a constant threat as they infiltrated every corner of the ship. Ilara, Dr. Cora's voice broke through her thoughts. We don't have much time. If the pulses keep escalating, it could trigger a cascade reaction. The artifact may destabilize everything. We need to make a decision. The urgency in his voice was clear, but Ilara couldn't bring herself to focus on the immediate threat. The artifact was at the center of everything. It wasn't just about the Kolkari now, it was about something much bigger, something that would alter humanity's destiny. She felt it, the weight of the choice ahead of her. They could still stop the Kolkari, maybe. But the artifact? She had no idea what unleashing its full power would mean. Can we control it? Ilara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question felt as though it carried the weight of the galaxy with it. I don't know, Dr. Cora admitted, his hands trembling over the artifact. It's like it's trying to bond with us, but I can't decipher its language. We're too far gone. Ilara glanced at Kara, who had positioned herself near the entrance, her eyes scanning the hallway as if waiting for the inevitable onslaught. We can't let them take it. If the Kolkari get their hands on it, they'll use it to subjugate humanity. We've seen what they're capable of. We can't afford to let them win. Kara didn't respond verbally, but her eyes, sharp and determined, conveyed everything. Ilara knew her crew was ready for anything, but even as she steeled herself for the coming storm, a deep, gnawing doubt twisted in her gut. She turned back to Dr. Cora. What happens if we try to unlock it? If we accept whatever it's offering? Dr. Cora hesitated, his gaze fixed on the artifact. We don't know. The artifact may offer us power, immense power, but it may also require a sacrifice. Something we might not be able to give. Ilara's stomach tightened. What kind of sacrifice? The artifact is ancient. Its creators, the Varth, understood power like no one else. But it seems it's linked to more than just technology. It's tied to humanity's very essence. It may demand something that we can't understand. The question is whether we're willing to pay the price. Another explosion rocked the ship, shaking the walls of the command hub. The Kolkari were closing in fast. Decision time, Captain, Kara called out, her voice tight with urgency. Ilara stood still, her hands clenched into fists. She could hear the footsteps of the Kolkari outside, hear the hum of their weapons charging. They would be on them in seconds. She could feel the pull of the artifact, the energy it radiated, and it was like a whisper in her mind, promising something beyond anything humanity had ever known. Ilara, Dr. Cora said again, his voice softer now. If you open this, if you unlock what it truly holds, you could change everything. You could change the course of history. But the question is, what will it cost us? Ilara exhaled slowly, each breath a battle. She had fought for humanity's future her entire life. She had believed in the strength of the human spirit, in the idea that humanity could rise above its flaws. But now, standing on the brink of everything, she wondered if their stubborn will to survive was enough. She looked at her crew, Kara, Dr. Cora, the others who had fought alongside her, who had trusted her, and she realized that the promise of power wasn't the most important thing. The true question was what humanity would choose to do with that power. Her decision was clear. We unlock it, she said, her voice resolute. Whatever it costs, we accept it. Humanity has made promises before. We will honor them now, and we will face whatever comes next, together. The room fell silent as Ilara approached the artifact. The pulses had grown stronger, thrumming beneath her skin, as if the very ship itself was alive, waiting for her to act. She placed her hands gently on the smooth surface of the object. The moment her fingers made contact, a shock of energy surged through her, flooding her senses with a rush of images, visions of stars, ancient civilizations, and vast, unimaginable knowledge. The artifact responded to her touch, its glow intensifying, its energy flooding through her mind. It wasn't just a tool. It was a conduit, a bridge between humanity and the legacy of the Varth. Ilara's heart raced, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. The pulses intensified, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. She saw her crew, her people, standing together, but their faces were no longer just human. They were something more, something evolved. The artifact was giving them a glimpse of what humanity could become if it embraced its potential. But she also saw the dark path, the price of power, a vision of destruction, of a galaxy plunged into chaos. The Kolkari, the forces of greed and control, would not hesitate to seize this power for themselves. They would enslave entire worlds. Humanity would be their first victim. Ilara, Dr. Cora shouted, pulling her from the visions. The artifact's energy was overwhelming, but Ilara stood firm, unwilling to back away. We're ready, she said, her voice steady. Humanity will not be ruled by fear. We will choose our future. And as she spoke those words, the ship's systems hummed to life. The artifact's glow reached a fever pitch, a beacon of light cutting through the darkness of the impending war. But would humanity be ready for the power it was about to wield? The ship trembled as Ilara stood before the artifact, her hands still resting on its glowing surface. The energy coursed through her, filling her with visions of power, destruction, and possibility. The artifact was no longer just a relic, it was a living force, a manifestation of humanity's greatest potential and its darkest fears. Ilara felt the weight of the choice she had made settling in her bones, heavy and undeniable. The ship's systems were alive, humming with newfound power. The Reclamation's internal systems came online with a crackle of energy, lighting up consoles and displays that had been dormant for hours. The crew, though shaken by the intensity of the moment, readied themselves for the inevitable conflict ahead. "We've activated it," Dr. Cora said, his voice both awed and apprehensive. "But what happens next, Captain? What have we unleashed?" Ilara didn't answer right away. She was still reeling from the visions the artifact had shared with her. There was so much to understand, so much humanity could gain, but there was also a price. The Kolkari had already felt the artifact's pulse. They would come for it with everything they had, and the artifact's potential was far greater than anything Ilara could fathom. But there was one thing she knew for certain: humanity would not bow to anyone, not even the Kolkari. She turned toward the crew, her expression resolute. "We've made our choice. The artifact's power is ours, but it's not just for us. It's for humanity. We've been given a chance to protect our future, and it's time we proved we're worthy of it." The sound of Kolkari troops pounding at the doors outside the control room brought them back to the present. The war for the artifact had only just begun, and Ilara could hear the heavy footsteps of the enemy drawing closer. They were here, and they wouldn't stop until they had the power humanity had just unleashed. "Captain," Kara said, her voice steady despite the imminent danger, "we can't hold out much longer. They're everywhere." Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of leadership pressing against her chest. But as she met Kara's eyes, she saw something that gave her hope, resolve. They had all made the same choice, and they would face whatever came next together. "Hold the line," Ilara ordered, her voice sharp. "We defend the ship, and we defend the promise humanity made. We will not let the Kolkari take this from us." With a unified shout, the crew moved into position. The artifact's energy pulsed in sync with their resolve, as if it had chosen them, fighting alongside them. The doors to the control room crashed open, and the Kolkari poured in, their black armor glinting in the flickering lights. Blaster fire erupted, lighting up the darkened room. Ilara fought alongside her crew, every shot a testament to their commitment to survival. The artifact's energy was with them, amplifying their strength, their resolve, and their will to protect what they had sworn to defend. But despite their bravery, the Kolkari were relentless. The mercenaries pushed forward, their advanced weapons cutting through the crew's defenses with precision. For every Kolkari soldier they felled, two more took their place. The hangar doors, previously sealed, began to buckle under the weight of the assault. Soon, they would be overwhelmed. "Ilara!" Dr. Cora shouted from across the room, struggling to keep the artifact's energy contained. "It's becoming unstable. If we don't sever the connection now, we'll lose control." Ilara's heart sank. The artifact's energy was spiraling out of control, its power growing exponentially. If it continued to surge, it could destroy everything: humanity's last hope, the ship, and perhaps even the Kolkari. "We can't stop now," Ilara said, steeling herself. "We've come too far. We hold this line." The sound of blaster fire intensified as the Kolkari forces continued to advance. But then, something unexpected happened. The artifact's pulse shifted. It began to resonate with the crew, each of them feeling a deep connection to the object and, by extension, to each other. The energy coalesced, forming a protective barrier around them, a shimmering shield that deflected the incoming blasts. The Kolkari soldiers paused, confused, their weapons still trained on the crew, but unable to break through the invisible wall. Ilara felt the power surge within her, and for the first time, she understood the true purpose of the artifact. It wasn't just about wielding power, it was about unity, about humanity coming together and transcending the petty divisions that had once torn them apart. "Captain," Kara said, her voice filled with awe, "it's not just the ship's systems. The artifact it's amplifying us. It's strengthening our bond. Elara could feel it now, an energy that wasn't just about raw force, but about the shared will of humanity. They had unlocked something far greater than a weapon. They had unlocked the potential of unity, of cooperation. Humanity's promise, broken for so long, had finally been restored. "Hold your ground," Elara shouted to the crew. "We will not be moved. This is our future." As the Kolkari forces regrouped, Elara knew they had only one option: retreat. But even as they made plans to escape, the artifact pulsed once more, sending out a shockwave of energy that rippled through the Kolkari ranks, knocking them off balance. The shockwave was powerful, but it didn't kill. It incapacitated, leaving the invaders dazed and unable to continue their assault. It was then that Elara realized the truth. The artifact had never been a weapon in the conventional sense. It was something far more powerful, a force for change, for unity, for hope. With the Kolkari forces temporarily stalled, Elara made the final decision. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future of the galaxy." And with that, she led her crew into the unknown, the promise of humanity's destiny lighting their way. The war was far from over, but for the first time in generations, humanity had found something worth fighting for, together.